In the quiet town of Cedar Hills, Utah in 1981, Friday nights meant football, cheers, and small-town pride. But on one of those nights, under the stadium lights, a high school cheerleader vanished without a trace. For 2 years, there were no answers, only whispers, rumors, and fading hope. Then, an unexpected discovery in her father's backyard will reopen the case and uncover a truth no one saw coming. Cedar Hills, Utah is the kind of town that feels hand-stitched. Narrow streets slope toward the football field. Porches sag under hanging ferns, and pickup trucks with sun-bleached paint idle outside stores with hand-painted signs. A barber pole that squeaks when it spins. A pharmacy window crowded with Polaroids from the county fair. On Friday nights, the whole place tilts toward the stadium. Porch lights click off, radios click on, and a river of headlights flows to the same patch of grass where the town believes it's invincible for 4 quarters. From open windows, you can hear the summer songs that never quite left. Betty Davis' Eyes, rasping through a kitchen radio. Jesse's Girl, blasting from a Camaro with a mismatched door. Teenagers lean on hoods with paper cups of soda. Jackets shrugged against a bite in the air. Converse scuffed to a soft gray. Moms in crocheted cardigans pass thermoses along the bleachers. Dads shout about field position like it's church liturgy. The stadium lights bloom to life, each bulb clicking on with a tiny delay, and the grass takes on that impossible evening green. Kelly Whitmore owns those lights. 17, a senior, captain of the cheer squad. Blonde ponytail tied high with a blue ribbon, sweater trimmed in gold at the cuffs, skirt pleated just enough to snap when she spins. People say she was born smiling and never stopped, but that's not quite true. Up close, she has a way of glancing past you, as if checking the horizon. In her left hand, the white pom-pom, soft, a little frayed at the tips. In her right, the blue, bright as bottled ink. When she runs a sideline, the 2 colors blur, and the crowd rises like it's rehearsed. At home, nothing is rehearsed. Her mother, Linda Carson, works nights at the clinic and weekends when she can. The divorce from Frank Whitmore, mechanic, solitary, a man who prefers engines to conversations, was final last spring. Kelly spends weekdays with Linda in the small duplex near the creek and Sunday dinners with Frank at his house on Alder Street. Where the TV is always on and conversation is a row of traffic cones to be driven around. Linda tries to be gentle with the silence. Frank pretends it isn't there. Kelly navigates both with practiced poise and keeps the biggest parts of herself tucked away where neither of them can see. One of those parts rides folded in her gym bag tonight. A thin envelope with no return address. The latest in a string that began at the end of junior year. The letters chat at first. Inside, jokes that weren't theirs, compliments that felt borrowed, then curled inward possessive, a script tightening like thread. She stopped showing them to anyone after the first 2. She told herself they were nothing, and then she stopped telling herself anything at all. Kickoff comes with a roar. The marching band hits a note that makes the bleachers vibrate. Kelly calls counts, claps, leads a chant the elementary kids know by heart. The Wolves in blue and gold trade punts with a team from the next valley. On the track, Kelly laughs for a camera, shoulders a squad through a complicated lift, brings them back down as clean as a landing. Every time she faces the field, the blue pom-pom flashes, and the white softens the glare of the lights. Midway through the second quarter, she catches the eye of her best friend on the squad, Gina Morales. "Gina mouths, you good?" Kelly nods, but when the timeout horn sounds, she leans close enough for Gina to smell her vanilla lip balm. "I need to take care of something fast," Kelly says, voice low and steady, like she's reminding herself to breathe. 2 minutes. Gina doesn't argue. Kelly jogs off the track, cutting behind the concession stand toward the parking lot with her pom-poms still in her hands. Out by the cars, the night is quieter. The gravel pops underfoot, and the stadium noise turns into a distant ocean. A couple sneaks a kiss behind an RV. Somebody laughs too loudly at a joke. A dog paws at a pizza box. Kelly's hand slides along the driver's door of her dusty sedan. It's unlocked, like it always is on game nights. She tosses both pom-poms onto the front seat, then hesitates, glancing at the envelope peeking from the side pocket of her gym bag. There's a smallest pause, a flicker of decision. She shuts the door but doesn't close it all the way, as if she expects to be back in a heartbeat. On the field, the game resumes. Gina finishes the count and glances down the track, half expecting to see Kelly jogging back, ponytail bouncing. She doesn't. Halftime arrives. The band spills into formation. The cheer squad runs the routine short. Gina figures bathroom, figures phone call, figures anything but the thing you only think much later. By the start of the third quarter, she taps the coach's shoulder. Kelly? He frowns like she's asking about the weather and points back to the routine. The Wolves lose by a field goal. People grumble and shrug. Kids dart into the bleachers. Paper cups skitter across the track. When the last of the crowd drifts away, Gina walks the distance to the lot with a slow, gathering dread. Kelly's car is exactly where she left it, angled under a broken light. The driver's door is pulled to but unlocked. On the front seat, the white and blue pom-poms tangled like seaweed. In the back seat, Kelly's purse, unzipped, wallet peeking, lipstick rolling in a groove. No keys on the dash, no scuff on the gravel, no broken clasp, no torn fabric. Just the breathless quiet of a place where something ended without a sound. Gina runs to principal. The principal calls Linda. Linda stumbles into her coat and drives with hazard lights strobing the dark. By the time she reaches the stadium, a deputy's cruiser already sits sideways near the entrance. The deputy takes a report, then another, then asks the same questions again, eyes soft but tired. Did she say where she was going? Did she have a boyfriend? Did she fight with anyone? Linda answers until her voice goes thin. Someone walks the grass with a flashlight, beams sweeping like slow wipers. A custodian unlocks the equipment room. Nothing. An assistant coach checks the visitor locker room. Nothing. The world seems to be shrinking, and Kelly is somehow outside its edges. By midnight, more cars return than leave. Word spreads along those little channels small towns keep hidden until they need them. People come with thermoses, with sweaters thrown over pajamas, with old flashlights that flicker when you shake them. They call her name into the cold and step around irrigation ditches and lift tarps just to be sure. Somewhere in all of it, Linda sits on the tailgate of a neighbor's truck and stares at the spot where she last saw her daughter spinning under the lights. In the morning, the real search begins. Flyers photograph a smiling senior portrait and tack it to telephone poles. The sheriff's office organizes volunteers into rows, hands out orange vests, marks squares of pasture on a map no one can stop looking at. They drag the creek, walk the fence lines, peer into culverts, sweep the stands. Church groups set candles on the stadium steps and pray in shifts. The high school counselor opens a library on a Saturday and lets kids cry in the stacks. For a few days, it feels like the town is breathing the same breath. That's when Detective Ray Mulligan steps in from the county. He is 52 with steady eyes and the kind of patience that makes people talk without remembering why. He chews cloves when question matters. The smell trails him like a signature. He doesn't raise his voice. He writes everything down, names, times, the color of a shirt, the make of a car, the exact phrasing of she said she needed to take care of something. He stands by Kelly's car for a long time, palms on the roof, eyes on the pom-poms. He asks Gina to walk him through the routine until she can't, then thanks her softly and hands her a tissue without looking like he's doing it. He visits Linda that night, sits at her small kitchen table, and listens more than he speaks. Days fold into weeks. A tip from 3 counties over leads to a trailer park, and nothing else. A shoe is found near the canal and belongs to someone else. A rumor ties Kelly to an older boy from a neighboring town. He's never met her. Mulligan keeps at it, moving carefully, doubling back, retracing. He asks the father, Frank, to come down to the station, and Frank comes jaw set, questions answered down the bone. Their conversation is polite enough to rattle. It produces nothing useful. At the garage, Frank keeps his head under hoods longer than before. At the clinic, Linda learns how to walk the hallways with light feet, as if sound alone might break her. Winter arrives early and stays late. Snow gathers on the bleachers. An old banner tears itself loose in February wind. In spring, the creek swells, and the search patterns change with the mud. Summer brings graduation without Kelly's name called. A pause that passes through the gym like a cloud. Fall returns. Another football season begins, because football seasons always do. The flyers fade to a pale ghost of face, and then to blank paper. People still look twice at a blonde ponytail in a grocery store aisle, and then look away. The case doesn't close. It just cools, like a stove you turn off but don't trust. It will take 2 full years and stroke a chance, 1 shovel in 1 backyard, for a detail buried under the ground to reignite the case and reveal a secret no one in Cedar Hills imagined. 2 years pass. The flyers bleach in the sun and curl at the edges. The bleachers get a new coat of paint. People still lower their voices when they say her name. It is August 1983, a dry morning in Cedar Hills, the kind where the sprinklers do more work than the clouds. At 8 a.m., a lawn truck stops in front of Frank Whitmore's house on Alder Street. The truck bed carries fresh rolls of sod, a coil of black irrigation line, a shovel with a bright new edge. The man who steps out is Walt Jensen, a quiet, broad-shouldered gardener who mows half the street. Frank hired him because a circular patch near the back fence kept dying no matter how much he watered. Walt walks the yard, stoops to pinch the soil, checks the sprinkler heads, then draws an X with his boot on the bad patch. "We'll cut it out," he says to Frank, who grunts a yes and goes inside to the hum of his television. Walt slides a shovel in and peels back a flap of grass like a lid. The smell changes. Less cut green, more damp dirt. His blade hits something that isn't stone, not the thunk of root. The sound is soft, fibrous, a scrape that gives. He kneels, brushes soil aside with a gloved hand, and a tangle of plastic strands shines through the dirt. Blue, white, crushed flat by weight and time. For a second, his mind offers easy answers. A kid's toy, leftover decorations, trash. Then his stomach drops in a way he will remember for the rest of his life. He has seen that blue and white before. Everyone here has. He saw it on the front page of the Tribune, on bulletin boards, taped to grocery store doors. Cheer pom-poms. The exact shades of the high school, blue like bottled ink and white like bleach rope. The same kind the missing Whitmore girl held under the stadium lights. Walt stands so fast he wobbles, then steadies himself and looks toward the back door. He doesn't call for Frank. He steps away from the hole, takes off his gloves, and walks to his truck. He dials the sheriff's office from the cab's radio phone, voice thick and careful. "This is Jensen, Walt. I'm at 313 Alder. You're going to want to send someone out." 2 patrol cars arrive first, tires crunching the gravel. A sergeant and a deputy cross the yard, while Walt points without stepping closer. The sergeant crouches, pulls on latex gloves, and clears the dirt in practice circles. He lifts the first pom-pom, then the other, blue and white matted, stained with the same soil that feeds the lawn. They are placed into separate evidence bags. The sergeant's radio pops and crackles. More units are called. The neighbors begin to notice. Mrs. Keating peers over a fence and gasps, hand to throat. Mr. Sato sets his rake down and shakes his head like he's trying to clear water from his ears. 2 teens on bikes stop at the curb, faces wide and stunned. By the time the unmarked sedan pulls up, a small knot of people is gathered in the cul-de-sac, murmuring the way people do when a story finally moves after 2 years of being stuck. Detective Ray Mulligan steps out of the sedan. He takes in the lawn, the open back door, the semicircle of onlookers. He greets Walt by name. Mulligan seems to know everyone by name and asks him to walk through the morning from the start. Walt does, voice steady now, telling it twice so Mulligan can read his notes back to him and check for missed details. Then Mulligan goes to the hole. He looks for disturbed edges, for shovel marks that don't match Walt's, for any sliver plastic bag, any knot, any trace. He finds a faint imprint of old roots woven through the palm strands, enough to tell him the items have been there a while. When Frank steps out and sees a patrol car in his driveway, he pauses on the stoop as if he'd forgotten what his hands should do. The sergeant explains, measured and flat. Frank's face doesn't crack, it hardens. He says the same sentence 3 different ways. I didn't put those there. I don't know how that happened. This is a mistake. The cuffs click behind his back anyway. The neighbors watch through curtains and between fingers. Word moves through the neighborhood like wind. Some say, I always thought, and don't finish the sentence. Others say, no, not Frank, and keep saying it as if repetition can will it true. At the station, the booking is routine. Frank's shoelaces are removed, his belt taken. He sits under cold fluorescent light, the shadow of the chain link from the window patterning his cheek. The first interview is Mulligan's. He brings 2 cups of coffee that taste like a bad decision and sets one in front of Frank. Frank's hands are steady when they wrap the paper cup. He is composed in a way that reads as stubborn more than calm. Mulligan starts with easy ground and works inward. When did you first notice the dead patch of grass? Last spring. Did you ever dig there? No. Who else has access to your yard? Kids, I guess. The meter reader. What about friends? I don't have many visitors. His voice doesn't break, but it frays at the edges when Kelly's name enters the room. Mulligan asks about the night of the game again, 2 years old and still fresh in his files. Frank's account hasn't changed. He watched the late scores on television, fell asleep in a chair, woke to the phone ringing at 11:23 p.m. with Linda's voice asking if Kelly was with him. He's precise about times, about small things. What was on TV when the furnace kicked on? He does not cry. He does not rage. He answers, and then he stares at the wall beyond Mulligan's shoulder as if there is something he can fix there. Between interviews, Frank leans back on the bench and closes his eyes. We learn more about him in the spaces between his words. A man raised to keep his grief in his fists and his guilt in his teeth. A man whose life narrowed after the divorce. He stopped bowling on Thursdays. He stopped answering the door on Sundays. He learned to eat standing up. After Kelly vanished, he put a second deadbolt on the back door and rammed the TV late to drown out the house. The call to Linda comes in the middle of her shift at the clinic. She hangs up, then lifts the receiver again, as if a second dial tone might be different. She makes arrangements without hearing herself. Finds someone to cover, walks to her car with her hand flat on her own chest to calm it down. At the station, she sees Frank through the glass. For a beat, they simply look at each other. 2 people tied by an absence and a history of bad endings. She sits across from him in a small interview room that smells like dry erase and old coffee. Did you do this? She asks, no preface, no lace. No, he says. It comes out tired, not wounded. They were in your yard, she says, the fact with teeth. I didn't put them there. His voice gets thinner. I never touched that ground. Silence fills the corners. Linda studies him for the private tales she used to know. How he pinched his knuckle when he lied. How he looked up and right when he couldn't find a word. She finds none of it, and that fact doesn't comfort her. It only widens the unknown. Mulligan steps back into the case like a man returning to a river he knows well. He orders a quick analysis of the palm fibers for soil composition and plant material. What kind of lawn roots are woven through, how deep, how old a layer is. He sends a tech to photograph the yard at angles, to measure the depth of the hole, to collect a ring of soil samples outward like ripples. He sketches the backyard by hand, marking fences, gates, the line of sight from neighboring windows. He also allows himself a theory he doesn't say out loud yet. If Frank had buried the pom-poms to throw off suspicion, why here? Why not a creek bed? Why not the dump? Why bury them shallow, in a place a dying patch of grass would eventually reveal? The simplest answer is not the only one. He holds a thought like a pebble in his pocket. The town needs a villain, and for a day or two Frank fits the shape. But police work is slower than anger. Mulligan and his team reopened the list from 1981. They checked movements, receipts. Old rumors turned to rust. One name rises the way it did before: Tommy Harris, the football coach. Friendly, visible, the kind of man people trust because he looks like someone they trusted once. Harris answers their call on the first ring and agrees to come down. He does, in a school windbreaker, an easy grin that never quite reaches his eyes. Mulligan asks where he was the night of the game, and Harris answers the way he answered 2 years ago, the Blue Lantern Bar, after the game, with 2 assistants and the equipment manager. He produces a receipt he kept, because you people keep asking. The bartender confirms. The assistants confirm. The timeline holds, at least for that Friday night. Mulligan logs it, a neat check mark in a black notebook. He knows that whatever happened in Frank's yard could have happened any time in 2 years. But the first pass is always the last night you know for sure. Outside, neighbors argue in low voices. He did it. A man says, meaning Frank. He couldn't, a woman replies. Even if he wanted to, he's not that. The town splits itself down a familiar seam. Those who believe a story is simple, and those who know it never is. By dusk, the evidence bags sit on a steel table under a buzzing light in the property room. The pom-poms look smaller there, less like symbols and more like objects someone once held and then lost. Mulligan stands over them, chewing a single clove until it numbs his tongue. He studies the grit in the plastic, the stains along the strands, the ghost of root woven through. He lets the questions line up in his head and chooses the one that matters most right now. If it wasn't Frank, somebody wanted us to think it was. The week after the pom-poms are found, Mulligan goes back to where the noise once lived. The high school. He walks the empty bleachers at noon, metal warm under a pale sun, and listens to the wind push paper cups along the track. He wants a place to talk. Places often do, if you stand there long enough. He starts with the people who were there the night Kelly vanished. Old teammates now working at the lumber yard, a former band kid who stocks shelves at the grocery store, a teacher who still keeps the same desk and the same jar of red pens. He asks simple questions and lets silence do the work. What did you see? What didn't feel right? What changed after? Rumors peel off in layers. 2 players hated each other over a starting spot. A booster promised something under the table to keep a kid eligible. Somebody says Kelly had a boyfriend no one could name. Somebody else swears she didn't. Everyone remembers the coach, Tommy Harris. The smile, the backslaps, the way he could turn the temperature of a room with a joke, and the way that smile went thin when you missed a block. He was good at getting what he wanted. One player says, even when it looked like you were the one choosing. On Wednesday, Mulligan sits across from an ex-linebacker named Mark Ellison in a diner booth that smells like coffee and onions. Mark was a junior that year. He stirs sugar until the spoon knocks the cup. I didn't think it mattered, he says, eyes on his hands. But you keep asking about that night. He breathes. After the game, I forgot my jacket in the locker room. I went back. I saw Coach Harris heading there alone. No assistants with him. No equipment guys. Just him. It felt weird because he told us he was going to Blue Lantern with the staff right after the handshake. He told us that twice, like he wanted us to remember. Time, Mulligan asks. Must have been 15 minutes after the final whistle. Mark says, people were still clearing out. I remember because a dad was yelling about a bad call by the gate. He shakes his head. Coach looked at me and said, go home, Ellison. Then he disappeared inside. It's not a smoking gun, but it's smoke in the wrong room. Harris's alibi says he left the field with 2 assistants, went straight to the bar, stayed there. Mark's memory bends that line. Mulligan notes the detail, tone of voice, the exact word, the direction of travel, and doesn't press Mark to remember more than he does. A stretch memory is worse than none at all. In the staff lounge, a secretary lowers her voice and closes the door. Coach Harris had a way, she says. He called us team even when we weren't. Cookies in the office, jokes in the hallway, but he kept lists. He kept lists on everyone. Who was late, who owed him a favor, who could be asked to help out on short notice. She glances at the window as if the word might carry. You didn't want to be on the wrong side of those lists. Control hides under charm. Mulligan has seen it before. People see the smile and miss the grip. Meanwhile, Frank Whitmore works at proving a negative. He is out pending further investigation, walking his neighborhood with a folder under his arm. He asks Mr. Sato to write down the nights he heard Frank's TV through the wall, the mornings he saw him leave for the garage at the same time. He brings gas bills to Mulligan to show steady use. No late-night digging lights in the yard, he thinks. As if a bill can testify. He tracks down an old co-worker who stayed late with him the week after the game. The details stack up like scrap metal. Heavy, dull, and not worth much at the scale he needs. None of it puts someone else in his yard with a shovel. None of it pulls the pom-poms back out of the ground clean. Linda watches all of this with her hands folded so tightly they leave marks. She meets Mulligan in the clinic break room, the hum of a vending machine filling the space between their sentences. I need you to move, she says, not unkindly, just at the edge of breaking. Every day we spend chasing the wrong thing is a day I have to sit with this picture, my daughter's things in his dirt. Her eyes shine and then harden. If Frank didn't do it, tell me who did. If he did, stop telling me there's doubt. Mulligan doesn't promise what he can't deliver. We're moving, he says. We're moving the right way. The words taste thin, even to him. An assistant principal opens a narrow storage room off the gym for Mulligan on Friday. The air is dust and old liniment. Abandoned lockers line one wall. Doors dented, numbers rubbed smooth. We cleaned these out last year, the man says, but there's one we never could open. Bent track. He shrugs. It's probably gum wrappers. He leaves Mulligan with a custodian and a pry bar. The door squeals. Inside, a thin shelf, a tangle of forgotten mittens, a school scarf, a hair clip with a missing tooth, taped flat under the shelf. 3 envelopes, yellowed at the edges, addressed in thin block letters to KW. No return address. Mulligan slides a pen under the tape and lifts carefully. The custodian swallows. We didn't go through student mail, he says, as if making a record. Back at his desk, gloves on, Mulligan opens them. The first is nothing and everything at once. I saw you tonight. You look like the sky when it's just turning dark. Don't go with him again. The second curls tighter. I told you I could make it easier for you. You keep ignoring me. The third is a knot. Cut and paste from newspapers, crooked lines glued to paper. You belong where I can see you. The dates on the postmarks straddle the weeks before she vanished. The ink shadows show they were written by someone who presses too hard. The envelopes smell faintly of antiseptic, the kind used in locker rooms. Mulligan logs each line into evidence, photographs, seals, sends copies to the lab for print and fiber, and anything they can pull from the glue. He thinks of the envelope he'd heard about in Kelly's gym bag, of how secrets migrate and duplicate themselves when no one is looking. Someone wrote to her from close by, close enough to know her practice schedule, close enough to have a key to a locker room and a reason to be there. He schedules another meeting with Tommy Harris. Harris walks into the interview room with a smile that aims to disarm and land as cooperation. Detective, he says, extending a hand like they're at a banquet. He sits without being asked, leans back like men who believe chairs are thrones. The windbreaker is gone. He wears a pressed shirt and a tie that says Booster Dinner, not police station. I talked to a former player. Mulligan says. He remembers you returning to the locker room alone after the game. Harris's smile dips and recovers. I pop back into the locker room all the time, he says. Coaches live in locker rooms. I could have been grabbing a whistle. I could have been putting away film. Memory is tricky, detective. You told me you went straight to the Blue Lantern with your assistance. I did, Harris says smoothly, after I checked the locker room. We're talking minutes. You want me to call the bartender again? He taps 2 fingers on the table, a tiny drum. Mulligan slides a photocopy of one of the letters across the table in a clear sleeve. Recognize the style? Harris looks, eyebrows lifted in practiced surprise. Creepy, he says light as air. Kids do weird things. We had a prank with cut and paste notes 2 years ago. Senior scavenger hunt. He tilts his head. You find that in her things? In a locker, Mulligan says. He leaves the pronoun floating. Harris shrugs. I feel for Linda. I do. But I don't know what you think you're going to pin on me with glue sticks and rumors. Mulligan watches his eyes more than his mouth. They flick to the door when the word locker lands. They blink slow when the word Linda surfaces, like a stone thrown in shallow water. He thinks of the list the secretary mentioned, of a man who keeps people in columns marked on me and useful later. He thinks of the way power looks soft until you press it, without a print, without a witness who saw a hand on a shoulder, without a camera that still works from 1981. Mulligan doesn't have much to swing. He keeps his voice level. If you remember anything else about that night, he says, you call me, and this time, coach, make sure the timing doesn't change. Harris stands. You've had me in your sights for 2 years, he says. The smile cracks just enough to show a tooth. If you had anything real, I wouldn't be standing. When he's gone, the room feels colder. Mulligan picks up the letter again and stares at the edges where the glue seeped. He writes a note to check custodial logs, who closed the building, who had keys copied, who signed for repairs. He sends a request for the school's master key inventory. He adds Harris's name to a short list of people he will not stop circling. That night, Linda calls him at home. He answers on the second ring. Sleeves rolled, tie loosened, a single clove between his teeth. She doesn't say hello. You're chasing a shadow, she says. My daughter is not a theory exercise. I know, he says. He means it, and it still sounds like a line. Do you? Her breath catches. Because all I see is a wall with string on it. All I hear is that the coach smiles and the town likes him, and maybe you do, too. I don't like any one of my files, Mulligan says. I checked them. That's different. I can't bury and dig for another 2 years, she says. Tell me something new, or tell me you're done. The line clicks off before he can answer. He sits in his small kitchen and lets the quiet find him. The case has mass again, but it doesn't have shape. He closes his eyes and runs a timeline like a film strip, frame by frame, until the phone on the table jolts him upright. The voice on the other end is thin with urgency. Detective, you need to come see this. It's about Coach Harris. Mulligan drives straight from his kitchen to Coach Harris's small house on Birch Lane. Lights off, engine humming low. A patrol car waits at the curb, doors open, radios crackling. The front door of the house isn't just unlocked. It's ajar, a thin slice of dark showing the hallway. The screen door hangs crooked. Inside, the air is wrong. Too warm for a house left alone, stale like someone left in a hurry and took the weather with them. He calls out and steps through. The kitchen is a snapshot mid-breath, an egg half scrambled in the pan. The burner off, but the metal's still warm. A plate with 2 bites gone, a glass sweating a ring onto the table. A drawer sits open, forks neat, knives missing. In the sink, a coffee mug with a smear of lipstick that doesn't look like any shade Harris would wear. Mulligan makes a note without deciding what it means. Down the hall, a bedroom closet gapes, hangers angled like startled birds. Shirts gone in a run, space where a suitcase should be. The top shelf holds a shoe box with loose receipts and a roll of electrical tape. On the dresser, a school windbreaker tossed fast, the zipper snagged in a thread. The bathroom mirror fogs at the edges from the heat of the day, and there are 2 toothbrushes in a glass. The basement door is at the back of the kitchen, paint flaking around the knob. It opens onto stairs that smell like old laundry and damp wood. Mulligan clicks on the light. A single bulb sways, giving the room a heartbeat. The concrete floor has dark spots from a dehumidifier that gave up years ago. One wall is half-paneled in cheap wood, the rest exposed studs and crumbling paint. Somewhere water ticks, a steady metronome for what's about to happen. He walks the perimeter first. Shelves of paint cans, an old tackling dummy, boxes labeled with years, 1979, 1980, 1981, like a man filing his favorite seasons. On a workbench, there's a folded newspaper from 2 summers ago with a headline about a lake drowning circled in red. Under it, a clipping with Kelly's senior photo. Corners soft with handling. Someone has underlined phrases in pencil. No trace. Last seen, parking lot. On a load table, a spiral notebook stops him. The cover is decorated with small stars, the kind a board student draws in the margins while the teacher talks. The first page is careful, neat handwriting he recognizes from copies of school forms. KW practice schedule. Chance. A list of 8 counts. Then don't forget ribbon. Mulligan slides it into an evidence bag, heartbeat steady. Next to the notebook, a thin strip of fabric, blue and gold. Tied once and then undone. Frayed in a way that says it was handled too much. It smells faintly of talc and old perfume. He bags at 2, air caught in his chest. The half-paneled wall draws him closer. The wood is tacked on quick, the nails proud instead of flush. Behind the left panel, a seam is warped. Mulligan slips a flat bar under the edge and levers gently. The panel bows and comes away in a sticky sigh. Behind it, plaster dust and something worse. The gypsum is gouged in chaotic arcs, a fan of pale scratches at shoulder height and lower. Not animal, not tool, fingers. Mulligan feels his jaw tighten. He stands still long enough to hear his own breath. He calls the crime text down and has him photograph the wall before a single flake falls. He points out the light pull, the missing screws, the edges of tape on the floor. He keeps his hands in sight, not because he thinks he'll touch anything, but because it's a reminder to himself not to. The shoebox from the bedroom turns out not to be just receipts. Under a layer of ticket stubs and booster club notes lies a stack of index cards, names, numbers, short notes in a tight coach's hand. 2 cards are clipped together. R. Danner, keys to equipment. K. Whitmore, talk after halftime. Mulligan flips the second and finds a single line. Gina equals close. He doesn't say a word. He writes 3. He knows the name Danner. Rick Danner was the assistant who helped Harris with drills in '81, then left the school, or rather, he left the earth last summer in a single car wreck on Route 52. Late at night, no other vehicles. People said he fell asleep. People say a lot of things when they can't ask the one person who could answer. The house yields more. A drawer of Polaroids of team celebrations. Nothing odd until the background of one catches the eye. Kelly at the edge of a frame, looking out at the camera but over her shoulder towards someone out of view. On a corkboard by the stairs, a rental flyer for lake cabins. Week or weekend. Call Earl at Jensen's Bait. Thumbtacked under a scheduled grid with a big circle around the upcoming week. By sunset, a warrant has become a manhunt. The county issues a bulletin on a tan Chevy pickup with a dent on the passenger fender and a missing hubcap. Harris's license and plate go out to every deputy and every neighbor with a mind to look. Mulligan calls the bait shop. Earl answers on the 5th ring and swears he saw Harris 2 days ago asking about cabins west of Saratoga Springs, the stretch where the cottonwood's thin and the shore goes quiet. They visit gas stations along the 68, the kind with analog pumps and handwritten ledgers. An attendant at the Sinclair thinks he remembers a truck because the man paid cash for a full tank and a map and asked where the roads washed out last spring. They rewind security tape on a VCR. The manager has to slap to make the tracking behave. The image ghosts and ghosts again, then lands on a frame of the Chevy at 9:17 p.m. A blur of a profile and another shape in the passenger seat. They photograph the screen because that's the only way to keep the moment from unspooling back into static. At a diner near the South Shore, A waitress is a man who looked like a coach. Her words came in with a quiet girl who didn't take off her sweater despite the heat. He ordered for her, she says, the way some men do when they want the world small. She noticed the truck. She noticed the way the girl's eyes stayed on the window, like a person counting trees. Back at the station, Mulligan spreads a day's finds across a table. Maps, prints, lists, the blue and gold ribbon under glass. He feels the case turning from fog to shape, the way a lake does in early morning when the sun finds it. The assistant who can't be questioned anymore. The coach who left eggs in the pan. The scratch marks behind a wall that never had a reason to be there. It's not proof yet. It's a path. Linda comes to the threshold of the squad room that night and sees the ribbon, the notebook, the circles on the lake map. She doesn't step inside. Tell me you're close, she says. We're closer than we were yesterday, Mulligan answers. It's not enough, and it's honest. She nods once, like a person accepting a medicine that tastes bad. Near midnight, a deputy bursts in with a brown envelope pulled from Jensen's bait. Earl had a bulletin board cabins for rent, each with a Polaroid thumbtack beside a phone number. A man, Harris. Earl now swears. Took one down 2 days ago. Earl made a copy first on a cheap instant camera because people borrow photos and never return them. The copy is soft and grainy, but the cabin is there, a squat box of a place. Dock listing, reeds thick on the left, a stand of cottonwoods framing the right edge. A shape in the window, could be a curtain. It could be anything. Mulligan holds a photo under the desk lamp until the white bleeds warm and the blacks go deep. He doesn't blink. The room falls away. On the back, someone has scrawled North Cove, past a gravel pit. He tucks the picture into a clear sleeve like it could bruise. They believe that's where Harris ran. They believe he isn't alone. Morning comes gray and thin over the North Cove, the reeds lifting and settling like breath. Mulligan's convoy leaves pavement for gravel, then gives up on gravel and crawls along two ruts that skirt a shallow inlet toward a stand of cottonwoods. The lake is a flat sheet of pewter under a sky that can't decide whether to rain. You can smell damp wood, algae, and something metal in the air. They park before the shore turns to mud and walk the last 100 yards, boots whispering through dry grass. The cabin from the photo waits exactly where it should. A squat box of dartboards, roof sagging on the lakeside, a small dock that listened to the reeds. No smoke, no sound. The door is shut and the lock is new, too new for a place this tired. Mulligan lifts a hand. The team fans out to the corners. One deputy covering the dock with his eyes, another watching the line where the cottonwoods open into a faint track. In the soft shoulder near the porch steps, he sees it before anyone speaks. A tire print with missing chunk of tread on the outside edge, like a bite taken out of cookie. The same notch described in the bulletin. Beside it, boot prints overrun themselves. And there, half a step behind, smaller prints, soft-soled, shallow, turning in at the toes. He holds the scene in his head as if a wrong blink could smudge it. They breach. The door gives a dry sigh. The room inside is one space. Kitchenette to the right, a table, a narrow bed against the left wall, a sheet thrown half back like someone stood in the middle of the night and didn't come back to finish the motion. The air smells like old pine cleaner and lake damp. On the table sits a plate with a crust of toast hardened to stone and a knife wiped clean too carefully. A glass with a faint ring of lipstick, subtle, not bright. On the bed, a folded sweater the color of oatmeal, small enough to make you think of a teenage girl, with a button missing from the cuff. On the chair, a notebook with a soft cover and a corner dog-eared. Mulligan flips a page with gloved fingers. The writing is neat at first, then looser, like the hand got tired. Lists, days without dates, water from pump, don't open door unless, 2 8s for kicks. In the margin, tiny flowers, the same ones that bloomed on the borders of Kelly's school papers. In the back, a single page torn out. The impression remains, a pressure mark that spells mom, if you tilt it just so in the light. On the windowsill, a small loop of blue and gold thread, plucked and plucked until it came free from something else. On a nail by the door, a ribbon not undone and retied, undone and retied again. Fresh, the crime tech whispers, more to herself than anyone else. She points to the trash, an aspirin foil, a crumpled napkin from a roadside diner on the South Shore. Last 24 hours. They don't find a phone. They do find a radio, batteries gone. Under the bed, a length of cotton rope that's been knotted and unnoted so many times it remembers both shapes. In the tiny bathroom, a comb with long hair caught in 2 teeth. Blonde, not dyed. A shadow crosses the open door. A man in a camo cap stands on the porch, hands raised, breath high in his chest. Saw the trucks, he says, before anyone can say stop. I fish mornings. I don't want trouble. But I saw a Chevy leave here late last night. Old tan, passenger fender dented. Man driving. Girl with him. Blonde. She looked quiet. He taps his throat like he's trying to swallow a word he doesn't trust. He went out the back way. Folks use that trail when the main road floods. Cuts across a gravel pit and hits the farm bridges before the highway. What time? Mulligan asks. After 9, maybe closer to 10. I heard the engine cough on the hill. The map in Mulligan's head draws itself fast. Service roads, irrigation gates, the washed-out culvert, the one-lane bridges no one's replaced because they don't carry enough votes. He keys the radio. Unit 7 to County. Roadblocks at County 52 and the South Levee Road. Check the farm bridge at Milk Creek and the crossing east of the gravel pit. Be advised, suspect knows the area. They're moving before the answer comes back. The convoy throws dust as it cuts back to the ruts, then the gravel. On the ridge, the wind pushes the lake into a dull chop. The first block goes up, but Harris never meant to take that road. He drops into the cottonwoods and runs the strips no map marks, alongside canals, behind berms, through a stand of trees that hide the truck at 40 yards. From the passenger seat of that truck, the world is a blur of reeds and fence posts. Kelly sits pressed against the door, wrists raw where scarf met skin, sweater cuffs pulled down like armor. Harris's voice is smooth and careful, the way you talk to a skittish horse. They want to make me look like the bad guy, he says. Your father let them. Your mother moved on. I am the only one who kept you safe. Just a little longer. Then we'll be clear. He doesn't look at her when he says it. His eyes scan for the next turn only locals know, where the berm dips, where the ditch is shallower, where the gate is chained but the chain is old. Kelly stares at her knees and tells herself not to believe or disbelieve, because both hurt in different ways. She rolls a thread of blue and gold between her fingers until it gives. The scrap sticks to her skin. The sound of sirens far off makes a shape in her chest that could be hope. She hides that shape like a secret. On the county road, Mulligan radios again. All units. Suspect vehicle likely avoiding main crossings. Focus on farm lanes and irrigation bridges. Watch for dust plumes on the south side of the pit. His driver swings him around a slow semi and drops back into the right lane as the road narrows. A deputy calls in a sighting. Tin Chevy on the old Miller track, heading east. They cut south, tires spitting gravel. For a mile, they run parallel with a line of poplars. Through the gaps, the Chevy appears and disappears like a trick. There, gone there again. The truck jounces over a cattle guard and takes a cut road that's barely more than 2 tire tracks in grass. Mulligan's driver follows, the suspension complaining. Ahead, a low bridge crosses a narrow channel. 2 planks are loose. Someone nailed them end to end years ago and never checked. Harris knows it. He eases the truck, then guns it, boards knocking and slapping. Behind him, the county SUV slows, checks, chooses a different path. They can't risk sending 3 tons onto it they haven't tested. They swing around and try the next crossing and lose a minute that hurts. The radio fills with short words. North ditch, over the berm, lost in dust. The sun lifts and the air turns bright and unforgiving. The Chevy cuts through an orchard, dust hanging in a rows like cloth. A farm dog gives chase until it loses interest. In the mirror, Harris sees a flash of lights and smiles like he's still up 6 in the 4th. Then the land rises, the trees thin, and the water appears again, silver and close. The Spanish Fork River slips through here, edging the fields before it bends toward town. An old wooden bridge rides it, one lane, side rails gone gray and soft. Farmers use it. Kids dare each other on it. The county has promised to replace it since before Kelly was born. Mulligan's SUV breaks out of the cottonwoods onto a stretch of dirt that aims straight at the river. Dust boils around them. Ahead, the tan Chevy rockets onto bridge, boards clacking like bones. The truck's weight makes the deck flex. A deep crack splits the morning, a sound like a tree giving up, like a nail tearing free from something it meant to hold forever. Mulligan sees the tailgate dip, the rails shudder, the river flash between planks. He lifts his hand without thinking, a useless command of physics and time. The bridge moans under the Chevy's weight, boards yawning apart to show flashes of dark water. Harris edges forward, then panics and guns it. Bad choice. The tail skews. The right rear wheel drops a few inches into a gap and slams back onto wood. The whole span shudders. For a breath, the truck stands at a slant like it's thinking about falling. Hold. Engine's off. Mulligan's voice is flat and loud. His driver kills the siren. Deputies fan out, keeping weight off the center run. Mulligan steps onto the bridge slow, testing each plank with his heel, like a man crossing ice. The river hisses under everything. Inside the cab, Kelly feels the truck tilt and sets her feet wide. The scarf at her wrist is loosened over miles of hiding emotion, working the knot each time Harris hit a rut. She hears the river the way you hear your own pulse. Harris flicks a glance at the side mirror, then at her. "Don't," he says softly, like a warning you give a child. He puts the Chevy in gear. The bridge answers with a deep, cracking complaint. The truck lurches forward another foot and stops. Something structural has given up. Harris swears, throws it in park, and grabs for Kelly's arm. She twists out of reach and yanks the knot free, like it was always meant come loose. The scarf gives. She's out the passenger side before he can catch her. Shoes slamming wood. Balance a miracle. A deputy reaches, and she folds into him as if gravity finally decided to be kind. Harris comes over the hood with a knife, the kind you buy in a hardware store and forget in a drawer until you don't. He doesn't shout. He moves with the confidence of a man who's won in sudden moments his whole life. Mulligan doesn't back up. He angles himself between Harris and the deputies bracing Kelly, hands open, weight centered. "Tommy," he says, using the name like a lever. "Put it down. This bridge won't hold anger." Harris slashes. The blade skates across Mulligan's sleeve, opening fabric, not flesh. A deputy hits Harris at the hips. The knife clatters across a plank and spins the gap. Mulligan drives a forearm under Harris's elbow and turns him simple and final. The cuffs click. The bridge settles into a groan that sounds almost disappointed. Two deputies frog walk Harris off the span. Mulligan walks Kelly the other way, counting his steps in case the one wants to remember where it's weakest. At the gravel. The paramedics are already there. Hands practiced, blanket around her shoulders, stethoscope finding the life in her chest. She keeps asking one question with her eyes until Mulligan answers aloud. "You're safe," he says, and only then does she let herself shake. On the road above the river, an ambulance door opens and Linda steps down before anyone can tell her to wait. For a second, mother and daughter just stare like they're learning each other's faces again. Then Kelly is in her arms and the sound Linda makes is half laugh, half prayer. The blanket shifts. Linda presses her hand to Kelly's hair and says her name like it's the first word she ever learned. At the station that night, the room where confessions happen looks the same as always. Fluorescent hum, table scarred by 100 pens, a vent that rattles when the AC kicks on. Harris sits with his wrists banded red. and his mouth a straight line, he can't keep steady. The hero mask is gone. Mulligan lays the photos out one by one. The ribbon, the notebook, the scratches behind the paneling, the cabin, the bridge report, the letter in cut and paste. Mulligan gives Harris a choice. Let the police prove his guilt over a lifetime or confess now. Harris finally admits that Rick Danner helped lure Kelly to the parking lot that night, but Danner's role ended with his fatal car crash a year later. Harris took Kelly's pom-poms during the chaos, hid them in his basement, then buried them in Frank's yard to frame him, knowing the dying grass would reveal them. He believed the case would collapse on Frank, the man already quietly suspected by the town. When asked about Kelly, Harris claims he kept her safe, insisting he planned to take her away because she didn't understand what her family had done to her. His confession fills 10 pages before he signs it without remorse. By the week's end, Frank is released without charges, greeted quietly by neighbors. Kelly is examined at the clinic, then returns home to her untouched bedroom. The town tries to move on. Friday night games return, but cheers are softer, locks are newer, and trust feels different. The Spanish Fork Bridge will be replaced. The cabin will eventually collapse, and the photographs of the scratch marks will remain in storage. When the stadium lights shine again, Kelly stands under them alive, her mother's hand on her shoulder, while Mulligan watches from the shadows, finally letting the clove in his mouth dissolve. Some truths stay buried for years, but they always find a way back into the light.